People didn't see it coming. They thought the moment would break you, that the weight of the insult, the betrayal, the sheer disgust of what was done to you would shatter your composure and expose your anger. They waited for the explosion, the emotional collapse, the screaming, the loss of dignity. But none of that came. What they saw instead was something they didn't know how to process: restraint, a kind of silence that wasn't weakness, but power restrained so tightly it made them uneasy. You didn't react the way they expected. You didn't fall into the trap, and that restraint left them speechless, confused, almost terrified. Because when someone responds to filth with discipline, when they face humiliation with grace instead of rage, it creates a disturbance in people's moral compass. It makes them question what real strength actually looks like. They thought the only way to fight was to fight back. They believed that retaliation was proof of self-respect, but what they saw from you was something different, something higher. You refused to let their corruption dictate your character. You didn't let their moral decay rewrite your own values. You stood still, unshaken, as the storm they created tried to pull you under. That stillness was not emptiness, it was control. It was the quiet acknowledgement that you are not ruled by impulse, not driven by the need to defend yourself against lies. And that's what they couldn't comprehend, that real power doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to retaliate. It simply exists. Your composure made them see their own chaos. The moment you didn't react, the mirror turned toward them. They had to face the ugliness of their actions, the smallness of their intentions, because when someone remains calm in the face of moral filth, it reflects the weakness of those who tried to provoke it. You didn't fight dirt with dirt. You chose discipline. You chose silence, and that silence became deafening. It wasn't submission. It was strategy. It wasn't fear. It was focus. And that difference exposed the hierarchy between you and them, a hierarchy they never wanted to admit existed. There's something unsettling about witnessing composure in the middle of chaos. It reminds people that emotion isn't control, that loudness isn't authority, that rage isn't power. They expected to see you lose yourself, but instead, they lost you, lost access to your energy, your reaction, your vulnerability. You took everything they thought they could manipulate and you transformed it into strength. That's why they're talking now, whispering, analyzing, replaying every second of how you handled that disgusting situation. Because deep down they realized they were not testing your limits, they were revealing theirs. And what unsettles them most is not what you said, but what you didn't say. It's the silence that carries the truth they tried to bury. It's the calm that exposes who truly holds control. It's that quiet defiance, that unshakable restraint that now has them speechless, wondering how someone could walk through humiliation and come out not broken, but elevated. The disgusting situation. You found yourself thrown into something that smelled of moral decay, a situation dripping with deceit, manipulation, and cowardice disguised as cleverness. It wasn't just an act of betrayal. It was a deliberate attempt to watch you crumble, to see how far they could push you before you'd finally break. They plotted in whispers, masked their intentions with smiles, and waited for the moment your humanity would crack under the pressure. They wanted to see you react, to lose your dignity, to give them proof that you were no different from them, because that's what people lost in their own corruption need most, evidence that no one is better, that everyone can be dragged down into the same pit of chaos. They expected you to respond the way most do, with rage, with panic, with desperate attempts to defend yourself. They wanted a show, an emotional collapse they could gossip about, a fall they could justify. But instead, you did something they didn't expect. You refused to participate in their game. You didn't fight fire with fire. You didn't meet cruelty with cruelty. You didn't give them the reaction they designed this entire situation to extract. You simply stood your ground, silent, deliberate, composed, and that silence carried more power than any outburst ever could. It was in that quiet defiance that the truth began to reveal itself, because in every battle of integrity versus corruption, it is composure that exposes the cowardice of deceit. You could feel the tension in the air shift, The ones who sought to see you humiliated started to fidget, to doubt, to feel a strange discomfort creeping in. It was as if your restraint forced them to face themselves. They could no longer hide behind the drama they had orchestrated. There was no chaos left to distract them from their own guilt. The stillness of your presence became a mirror they couldn't look away from. You didn't need to shout, to argue, to justify. Your very existence, unbroken, undisturbed, became a statement of truth so loud it silenced the entire room. There's something deeply revealing about how people behave when they believe they hold power over you. They test your boundaries not because they want to know who you are, but because they hope you'll forget who you are. They create chaos because chaos is their only defense against order, against the kind of calm strength they don't understand. But when you refused to fall into that trap, when you met their filth with grace, you changed the entire dynamic. You didn't just endure the situation, you transformed it. What was meant to destroy your reputation became a stage for your discipline. What was meant to shame you became proof of your character. And the irony is that the more they tried to expose you, the more they exposed themselves. Every manipulative act, every deceitful whisper, every attempt to twist the narrative became obvious to everyone watching. The ugliness they thought they could hide beneath layers of pretended virtue started to show simply because you didn't react. Your silence didn't protect them, it magnified them. It turned their own behavior into a spotlight that revealed their pettiness, their weakness, their insecurity. You didn't need to accuse them. Their actions became their own indictment. They wanted control, but control slipped away from them the moment you refused to play the part they had written for you. The very strength they wanted to exploit became the thing that undid them, because in the end, no one can manipulate a person who remains unmoved. No one can defeat someone who refuses to enter the battle. You stood still, and that stillness became your armor. It wasn't the kind of silence that hides fear. It was the silence that comes from absolute clarity, the understanding that dignity is louder than any defense. That's what they never expected. They thought humiliation would weaken you, that the sting of injustice would push you into chaos. But it didn't. It refined you. It forced you deeper into yourself, into that quiet space where truth lives, unshakable, untainted. And now, the same people who once wanted to see you destroyed can't stop talking about how you survived it with such composure. They're confused by it, haunted by it, maybe even inspired by it. Because in that disgusting situation, while they were sinking lower, you were rising silently, above their noise, above their deceit, above their understanding of what true strength really means, the power of restraint. There is a rare kind of power in restraint, a strength that doesn't roar but radiates, quiet and deliberate. It's the power that exists when you are fully capable of destruction, yet you choose discipline instead. Most people misunderstand restraint. They think it means submission or weakness, but it's the opposite. It's what separates those who are controlled by emotion from those who have mastered it. To restrain yourself in the face of injustice, insult, and humiliation is not to deny your feelings, it is to govern them. It is to recognize that the immediate satisfaction of revenge is nothing compared to the long-term transformation of dignity. You could have responded, and you had every right to. You could have let your anger speak for you, could have exposed what was done, could have made them taste the same bitterness they tried to feed you. But you didn't. You took a step back and realized something they couldn't, that reacting would only bind you to their chaos. The moment you answer hate with hate, you become part of the same corruption you despise. The second you let your emotions lead, you hand your power away. Restraint, then, becomes not just a choice, but a declaration, a refusal to let others dictate your behavior. It's saying, I am not a puppet of provocation. I will not let your darkness define my light. The beauty of restraint lies in its precision. It is an art, the ability to feel everything yet not let those feelings turn into weapons. You can feel the pain, the injustice, the sting of betrayal, and still hold yourself upright. That is not apathy. That is strength born from self-awareness. You understand that emotional outbursts may win moments, but they lose meaning. You realize that silence, when grounded in confidence, can echo louder than any scream. And that's what unnerves those who attack you: your refusal to be predictable, your refusal to give them the reaction that validates their cruelty. Restraint dismantles their power because the manipulative depend on your reaction to justify their behavior. They want to pull you into the mud, to make you unrecognizable from them. But when you stay composed, when you respond with stillness instead of chaos, the entire structure of their control collapses. You break the psychological contract they rely on, the one that assumes you'll fight on their terms. By doing nothing destructive, you destroy everything they built. You take away the one thing they needed, your participation. And when you refuse to participate in corruption, you expose it for what it truly is. People often think power is about dominance, about being louder, faster, more aggressive. But true power is about endurance. It's the ability to carry your composure through fire, to stand unbroken while the world demands a reaction. Restraint doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care too much about what truly matters: your integrity, your peace, your higher purpose. And in the quiet of that restraint, something profound begins to happen. The chaos outside starts to lose its grip on you. You stop being a character in their story and become the author of your own. There's a psychological shift that occurs when you choose to remain calm under pressure. You rise above the emotional frequency of the situation. While they operate on impulse, you function through insight. While they're driven by ego, you're guided by principle. That's what makes restraint such a powerful act of rebellion. It's not about ignoring what happened. It's about mastering yourself so completely that no one can push you into a version of yourself that doesn't align with your values. And what they never realize is that restraint is not passive. It's deeply active. It takes strength to hold your tongue when the truth burns on it. It takes courage to walk away when every nerve in your body screams for confrontation. It takes wisdom to understand that not every battle deserves your energy. You didn't refrain because you couldn't fight. You refrained because you understood that fighting them would mean lowering yourself to a level where victory has no meaning. So you chose stillness, not as surrender, but as supremacy. You chose to conserve your power instead of scattering it across pointless arguments and empty retaliation. And that choice, though quiet, created ripples that they could feel. They expected rage and found restraint. They expected chaos and found clarity. And now, even if they can't admit it aloud, they know the one who stays calm in the storm is always the one who controls it. The psychology behind their shock. They didn't know what to do when you didn't react. It caught them completely off guard. They had built the entire situation on a single assumption: that you would break, that you would explode, that your emotions would take over and confirm everything they wanted to believe about you. They expected the tears, the rage, the desperate attempt to fight back. That was the moment they were waiting for, the moment they could point at and say, "See, we were right." But that moment never came. Instead, they were met with something they didn't expect: stillness. A composure so unsettling that it shifted the entire balance of power. Your silence was like a mirror, and it reflected everything they tried to hide from themselves. It forced them to confront what they had done, what they had become. They wanted chaos, but they got order. They wanted to see guilt, but they were met with grace. And that contrast disturbed them because it revealed the truth: that you weren't the problem. They were. The calmness you showed in that moment exposed their insecurity, their moral confusion, their hunger for validation. It was as if your composure stripped them of their illusion of control. Without your outrage to feed on, they were left with nothing but their own conscience, and that silence became unbearable. The human mind is addicted to reaction. People who manipulate others depend on it. They thrive on your energy, on the emotional charge that comes from making you defend yourself. It gives them significance. It gives them a sense of power. But when you refuse to give them that, something inside them collapsed. It's like a performer losing an audience. Without your engagement, their act became meaningless. Your silence didn't just protect your peace, it dismantled their performance. Every word they had rehearsed, every plan they had built, every expectation they held, all of it fell apart the moment you didn't respond the way they wanted. And that's the deepest kind of shock, when someone realizes they can no longer control the narrative. They start replaying the moment in their minds, trying to understand how they lost their grip. They search for the weakness they thought they saw in you, but now it's gone, replaced by something unshakable. Your restraint didn't just silence them, it redefined how they saw you. Suddenly, the person they underestimated became the one they couldn't comprehend. Your calmness, your refusal to descend into their level, made them aware of something they didn't expect: the hierarchy of character. They realized that while they were busy trying to provoke, you were standing in mastery. That kind of control unsettles people who live on manipulation. They depend on chaos to survive. They feed off drama because it keeps them from confronting their own emptiness. But when you remain calm, when you look at them without anger, without fear, without reaction, they're forced to feel the full weight of their own actions. That's why silence is so powerful. It removes distraction. It removes excuses. It leaves only truth. And most people can't bear the sight of truth when it's looking straight at them. You could almost see it in their eyes. That flicker of confusion, the discomfort, the sudden awareness that they had been exposed. Because they didn't just fail to break you, they revealed themselves. They thought your silence would make you seem weak, but instead it made them look small. The more you refused to play their game, the more obvious it became that they needed it, that their entire sense of control depended on your reaction, and without it they began to unravel. It's a strange reversal. The aggressor becoming the anxious one, the manipulator losing control. But that's the psychology of shock. When someone meets integrity where they expected chaos, when they see grace where they expected revenge, they don't know how to process it. Their mind can't categorize it because it doesn't fit the script they wrote. They thought they could define you, but instead you defined them. You revealed what happens when someone chooses strength through stillness, when they hold their peace and force the truth to do the talking. And now, even as they pretend it didn't affect them, you can feel the shift in their behavior. They tread carefully. They speak your name differently, slower, more measured, sometimes with discomfort, because deep down they know that something in that encounter changed the dynamic forever. You no longer fit the image they created of you. You're not someone they can provoke or manipulate anymore. Your silence taught them a lesson they didn't expect to learn, that the calmest person in the room is always the one who truly holds the power. The hidden strength behind calmness. Calmness is often misunderstood. People see someone composed in the middle of chaos and assume they don't care, that they're detached or indifferent. But calmness, when earned, isn't apathy. It's mastery. It's the result of countless battles fought within oneself, the kind that no one ever sees. It's the outcome of learning how to feel pain without letting pain define you. To remain calm in a disgusting, demeaning situation is to stand at the edge of chaos and refuse to be swallowed by it. It's the quiet realization that not every storm deserves your energy, and not every attack deserves your attention. When everything around you demanded a reaction, you did something extraordinary. You paused. You didn't match noise with noise. You didn't try to prove your worth to people who had already decided to misunderstand you. You knew that sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all, because calmness is not the absence of emotion, it's the management of it. It's what happens when your inner world is no longer dictated by external chaos. You've seen what rage does to people. You've watched how anger blinds judgment and how retaliation poisons the soul. So you chose differently. You chose to see instead of react, to observe instead of engage, to understand instead of explode. That decision, that split-second choice to remain calm, is what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. It's what separates those who are slaves to their impulses from those who've learned to master them. Calmness is strength restrained. It's self-control wrapped in quiet dignity. When you refused to lash out, you didn't suppress your humanity, you elevated it. You stood as proof that discipline is more powerful than destruction. You showed that the one who governs themselves holds authority over any situation. And that truth unsettles people, because in your calmness, they saw the one thing they feared most, control they couldn't take away from you. People often mistake emotional silence for weakness, but silence born from understanding is terrifying to those who depend on chaos. It's the silence of someone who sees through the illusion. When you didn't fight, when you didn't respond to their filth, you weren't surrendering. You were conserving your power. You refused to let their moral decay contaminate your peace. And in doing so, you revealed something profound. That calmness is not passive. It's an act of moral defiance. It's a declaration that says, "You cannot make me like you." That is strength in its purest form, the refusal to become the very thing that tried to destroy you. There's a particular kind of authority that radiates from those who've learned calmness through pain. It's not the authority of dominance, but of understanding. You've seen chaos, you've been dragged through betrayal, through deceit, through humiliation, and yet, here you are, still centered, still standing. That kind of calm cannot be faked. It's carved into you by experience, shaped by hardship, and solidified through endurance. People sense it even if they can't name it. It's in the way you speak slowly when others shout, in the way you listen when others demand to be heard, in the way you refuse to rush toward revenge. That calm presence becomes magnetic. People who once mocked it begin to respect it, and those who tried to provoke it begin to fear it. Because calmness exposes truth. When everyone else is scrambling, defending, and explaining, the one who remains still becomes the mirror of the entire scene. You didn't need to prove who you were. The moment you didn't react, everyone saw who they were. That's the hidden strength. Calmness doesn't shout to be understood. It forces understanding through silence. It's a power that humbles the arrogant and unsettles the deceitful. And that's why your calm scared them, because it held up a reflection they weren't ready to see. Calmness doesn't mean you don't feel anger or pain. It means you refuse to let those feelings control your identity. It means you've learned that not all wars are fought with words or fists. Some battles are fought in silence, and the victory is peace. When you stayed calm in the middle of that storm, you weren't weak, you were wise. You knew that chaos feeds on attention, that conflict grows through reaction. You didn't starve yourself of emotion. You starved the chaos of its fuel, and in doing so, you discovered that the real power lies not in how loudly you fight, but in how silently you endure. That's why calmness is so rare, because it requires immense courage to stand still when everything inside you wants to move. It demands faith in something greater than the moment, faith in truth, in timing, in the strength of your own restraint. It's the quiet confidence that says, "I don't need to win this argument to win my life." And that calm, that inner stillness, became your greatest weapon. While others lost themselves trying to destroy you, you found yourself in the calm, and that made all the difference. Why people are impressed now? They didn't understand your silence before. They mistook your calm for weakness, your patience for passivity, and your refusal to fight back for surrender. But now, as the dust settles and the truth begins to reveal itself, they see it differently. They realize that your composure was not silence born of fear, it was strength held under restraint. They see now that what looked like distance was actually discipline, and what seemed like indifference was your quiet decision not to lose yourself in their chaos. It's strange how people only begin to respect strength when it's wrapped in stillness, not in noise. Because in that stillness, they finally see the power that was always there, patient, deliberate, and entirely self-contained. At first, they tried to provoke you because they thought they could. They assumed that you, like everyone else, would react, shout, and crumble under the weight of humiliation. They believed that control belonged to the loudest, to the ones who caused the most disturbance. But when you didn't respond, something in them broke. They began to realize that the one who stays calm in conflict is the one who truly commands it. That realization shook them because they expected to destroy you, and instead they watched you stand taller than ever, untouched by the fire they tried to set. Now they talk about you differently. The same mouths that mocked your patience now speak of it with awe. The same eyes that watched you, waiting for you to fall apart, now look at you with hesitation. There's a quiet respect, sometimes even fear, in how they speak your name, because they've seen what it means to hold yourself together when everything else falls apart. They've seen how grace can dismantle aggression, how dignity can silence deceit, and how discipline can overpower destruction. And that's what leaves them stunned. You didn't win through confrontation, you won through control. You didn't overpower them, you outgrew them. They start to understand that strength isn't measured in how loudly someone defends themselves, but in how deeply they can trust themselves. You never needed to explain, justify, or prove. You simply lived your truth, and that truth spoke louder than any defense could. While they were busy plotting, talking, and spreading noise, you were still. And that stillness became the loudest sound in the room. People notice when someone refuses to be moved by chaos. It unsettles them because it's so rare. They see now that your silence wasn't weakness. It was an act of profound self-respect. You didn't react because you knew reaction gives power away. You knew that feeding their drama only fuels their sense of control. Instead, you let your peace speak. You let time do what it always does, reveal everything. And now, those who doubted you are beginning to realize that you never needed to fight for validation. You let the truth do the fighting, and the truth never needed noise to win. There's something magnetic about someone who refuses to be pulled into pettiness, who keeps their head held high even while being dragged through the mud. People admire that because deep down, they wish they could do the same. They've watched you handle betrayal, disrespect, and humiliation without losing your dignity. And that has changed the way they see you. It's no longer pity, it's admiration. They can't deny that what was meant to destroy you only refined you, that every act of cruelty became the fire that forged your character into something unbreakable. They see that you've turned pain into power, that you've learned to transform wounds into wisdom. And even if they don't say it, even if pride stops them from admitting it aloud, they know you earned a kind of respect that can't be faked or forced, because people eventually recognize authenticity. They can sense when someone has walked through hell and still managed to keep their soul intact. That's why they're impressed now. Not because you fought harder than anyone else, but because you didn't let the fight change who you were. They see that while others used chaos to feel powerful, you used discipline to stay powerful. And that difference, that quiet, unwavering strength, is what separates you from them. Now, in the silence they once mocked, they find themselves listening. In the restraint they once despised, they now see the definition of control. They've realized that you didn't need to prove your strength to anyone. You embodied it. And that realization, that undeniable shift in how they perceive you, is what leaves them in awe. They know now that you were never fragile. You were being forged, and the version of you that emerged cannot be shaken by anything or anyone. The moral and spiritual lesson. Life has a strange way of revealing its deepest lessons through pain and betrayal. What once seemed like chaos now begins to appear as something divinely orchestrated. A process meant not to break you, but to refine you. The trials you faced weren't random. They were purposeful, deliberate, and necessary for your awakening. Every false friend, every cruel word, every disappointment carried within it a fragment of wisdom, a message whispering that strength is not born in comfort. It is born in struggle. You were not being punished, you were being prepared. What looked like destruction was, in truth, a sacred kind of rebuilding. When you look back, you can see it now. The hands that tried to tear you apart unknowingly became the tools that shaped your resilience. The betrayal that once felt unbearable forced you to rely on something higher than human loyalty. The silence that once suffocated you taught you how to hear your own soul. And the rejection that once burned like fire revealed the truth about where you never truly belonged. It's as if every storm was designed to strip away illusion after illusion until all that was left was you, real, aware, and aligned with something greater than the noise around you. There is something profoundly spiritual about enduring humiliation and still choosing not to hate. It's a kind of transcendence, the ability to see beyond the immediate wound and recognize that even in injustice, there is divine order at work. Because when people betray you, when they lie and manipulate and turn away, they don't just expose themselves, they also reveal what's sacred within you. They make you realize that your peace, your empathy, your honesty were never weaknesses. They were rare strengths. The pain of losing those who were never meant to stay teaches you the most valuable truth of all, that peace is not found in people but in purpose. You begin to understand that the path of growth is not meant to be easy or universally accepted. There will always be those who misunderstand you, who mock your depth, who cannot comprehend why you choose integrity when deceit seems easier. But spiritual maturity means realizing that not everyone can walk with you where you are going. Some people were placed in your life to test your patience, to awaken your discernment, or to push you toward the next stage of your evolution. And once their purpose is fulfilled, they fade away. Not because you failed, but because you learned. There's a kind of divine justice that doesn't need to shout. It moves quietly, with precision, revealing truths at the exact moment they need to be seen. The people who wronged you begin to face the consequences of their own choices, not through revenge, but through realization. And you, the one they tried to tear down, rise in a way that can't be explained by human effort alone. It's not pride, it's alignment. You've learned that forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their actions. You've learned that walking away in peace is a louder statement than any confrontation could ever be. There's also humility in this transformation, because when you begin to see how life has used even your pain to push you forward, you stop questioning why things happened and start trusting that they had to. The tears you once cursed now look like seeds, the foundation of something sacred growing within you. And slowly, the anger fades, replaced by an unshakable calm. That's the moral and spiritual victory, not the external success, not the praise or the recognition, but the inner knowing that you survived with your character intact. Now you move differently. You no longer chase validation because you've seen how fickle it can be. You no longer beg to be understood because you understand yourself. You've learned that silence has power, that solitude has wisdom, and that peace has a voice that only the strong can hear. What others saw as your downfall was actually your awakening, a spiritual rebirth disguised as loss. And even though the scars remain, they don't represent defeat. They represent the story of how you became unshakable, not because life spared you from pain, but because you faced it and discovered something sacred within it. Every trial was a teacher. Every heartbreak was a lesson. Every betrayal was a mirror reflecting back your own growth. And through it all, you learned that real strength doesn't roar. It endures, it bends, it breaks, it rebuilds, and it returns wiser. You now walk with the quiet understanding that everything, even the cruelest moments, was leading you somewhere meaningful. What once felt like darkness was guiding you toward light, and what once felt like loss was preparing you for alignment with who you were always meant to become. What they realize now. Now the air has changed. The same people who once whispered your downfall now whisper your name with hesitation. There's something different in their tone. It's no longer mockery or disbelief. It's a strange mix of awe and unease. They don't talk about you the same way anymore because they've seen something they can't unsee. You didn't retaliate. You didn't collapse. You didn't become what they accused you of being. Instead, you transformed, quietly, steadily, in ways they never imagined you could. And now they realize that their attempts to destroy you only made you more precise, more disciplined, more untouchable. It's almost unsettling for them because they built an entire narrative around your supposed weakness, only to witness your strength dismantle it without a word. You can sense it in their eyes, the confusion, the quiet regret, the curiosity mixed with fear. They never thought silence could be so loud, that restraint could echo louder than rage. They expected chaos, but they got order. They expected emotional ruin, but they got composure that felt divine. It's dawning on them that they were never in control of the story. They were merely background noise in your transformation. Every rumor, every manipulation, every subtle attack they launched was supposed to weaken you, but instead it purified your focus. You stopped trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, and that shift in energy broke their hold completely. There's a realization that spreads among them now, an uncomfortable truth they can't ignore. They begin to see that your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. That every moment you refused to engage, every time you chose dignity over argument, you were reclaiming your power piece by piece. They start to remember the small details, how calm you remained when they expected outrage, how you carried yourself when others tried to stain your name. That calmness now haunts them. It lingers in their thoughts because it reveals what they never had, control over themselves. And that's the real wound for them. Not that they lost the conflict, but that they lost to someone who never even needed to fight. They're starting to talk differently about you behind closed doors, not with pity, not with mockery, but with an almost reverent disbelief. They call it luck, timing, divine favor, anything that can help them make sense of how you rose from what they thought would bury you. But deep down, they know it wasn't luck. It was discipline. It was moral strength. It was your refusal to participate in their chaos. And that realization is uncomfortable because it exposes them to their own reflection, to the truth that their cruelty was a projection of their own weakness. Now they must live with that awareness, and some can't bear it. They begin to look back on everything they said and did, and the weight of it starts to press on them. The guilt creeps in, not as a loud admission, but as a quiet restlessness. They avoid your name in conversation, yet they think about you constantly. The calm way you handled everything keeps replaying in their minds. It becomes a symbol of something greater, a reminder that integrity can outlast deceit, that truth eventually exposes falsehood without needing to shout. And that's what unsettles them most. They realize you didn't just survive, you evolved. You didn't just endure, you elevated. Now even your presence has changed meaning. The same people who once saw you as easy to manipulate now treat you like someone they shouldn't cross. The same ones who thought you were naive now understand that your kindness had depth, not weakness. There's a quiet respect forming, sometimes admiration, sometimes guilt, sometimes envy. They recognize now that what you displayed wasn't apathy or avoidance. It was mastery. You taught them without words that calmness in the face of evil isn't a lack of emotion. It's emotional sovereignty. You showed that composure isn't about indifference. It's about wisdom that refuses to waste itself on the undeserving. And though they may never admit it aloud, they've learned something profound from you. The true power doesn't come from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. They know now that their attempts to drag you into their darkness only expose their own. That's why your silence feels so loud to them still, because it carries truth they can't escape. You've become a living contradiction to their assumptions, proof that moral integrity doesn't just survive corruption, it thrives in spite of it. Now they realize you were never fragile, never lost, never small. You were tempered. You were refined by what they threw at you. And while they were trying to strip away your worth, you were quietly becoming something greater, something that didn't need their approval, something that existed beyond their reach. That's the irony they face now, that the very storm they sent to break you became the proof of your unbreakable nature. They see it clearly, and though they'll never say it out loud, every time your name is spoken, it carries a new weight, not of pity, but of reverence, because now they understand what you've become, the evidence that dignity in the face of corruption is the rarest, most unsettling power of all. So yes, people are impressed, but it goes far beyond admiration. What they're feeling now is something closer to awakening. They've seen something in you that disrupts their understanding of strength. They thought power was noise, that dominance came through aggression, that control meant having the loudest voice. But you've proven that the highest form of control is calmness, the ability to remain centered when everything around you is chaos. You didn't react. You responded with silence. You didn't fight, you transcended. That's why the air has shifted around you. Because what you did wasn't just an act of restraint, it was a revelation of hierarchy, a reminder that emotional mastery is a form of divinity disguised as composure. You became the lesson they never expected to learn. By choosing dignity over reaction, you dismantled the illusion that rage equals strength. You showed that the person who can stay calm while being attacked possesses a depth that those who rely on chaos can never reach. You didn't need to prove anything. You simply existed in truth, and truth doesn't argue. It stands. It's unshakable, immovable, and quietly victorious. That's why those who once mocked your silence now find themselves haunted by it. Your restraint forced them to confront their own reflection, the parts of themselves they tried to hide behind accusation and manipulation. You've walked through fire and didn't let it burn your integrity. You faced deception and didn't let it turn you bitter. That's what separates the ordinary from the chosen. The ability to endure cruelty without becoming cruel, to experience darkness without losing the light within. The calm you carried through that disgusting situation wasn't emptiness, it was authority. You stood firm in moral power while others lost themselves in emotional chaos. And now the silence you held has become your victory song, echoing louder than any argument ever could, because in the end, real strength doesn't roar. It doesn't destroy, it transforms. The calm mind, the steady hand, the composed soul, these are the marks of someone who has met evil and refused to mirror it. You didn't lose control, you reclaimed it. You didn't let their filth define you. You purified yourself through it. And now, even your enemies recognize that there's something untouchable about you. You've become living proof that silence isn't surrender. It's supremacy. The kind of supremacy that comes only from knowing who you are and refusing to let the world make you forget it.